For years, I've been tangled up in a bizarre game of cat and mouse with a woman named Catherine Shelton.
Controversy has swirled around me for 25 years.
She's a really, really smart woman.
She had a touch of genius and a touch of evil.
Well, I wish I'd always been the perfect lady, but I don't know, it just didn't work out that way.
Men just seemed to drop dead all around her.
That's a lot of coincidences.
I'm almost there. I'm not Luca Brasi from The Godfather, and I don't go around shooting people.
My name is Jenna Jackson, and I'm a Texas girl. And a true crime journalist. Back in 2003, I covered the Shelton story for 48 hours.
You remember her?
Yeah, I'm afraid I do. She tried to kill me.
Catherine denies that, and I was hooked.
Wow.
There was a doctor, an ex-boyfriend, beaten to death in his garage.
That was the garage.
I think the homicide detectives looked like it was something pretty personal.
She says she had nothing to do with it.
If you had to have a number one prime suspect, it's Catherine.
A man named with Catherine in a lawsuit was found with a bullet in his head. Authorities said he was playing Russian roulette.
And the whole Russian roulette thing just doesn't make
Playing
sense.
Russian roulette by yourself.
Right.
I wouldn't buy that. If you knew the guy, I wouldn't buy it.
I'm not a vengeful person.
She was a lot of fun when she wasn't trying to kill me.
This ex-boyfriend says he's lucky to be alive.
I opened the door, and as I slowed down, yeah, that bitch shot me. She shot me.
There was a former client.
This is where the case kind of goes from bad to weird, so.
He turned up in Catherine's house, dead and naked. His death ruled an accident.
I lead a dull life.
The list goes on and on.
Probably some people say it's that Catherine, she's done it again.
A husband and wife shot up in an ambush.
And she screamed, "Shoot her. Shoot her again." I know it was her. Catherine Shelton.
Not me. I wasn't there.
Her husband, Clint, is currently serving a life sentence for that crime.
Back up. Shelton, you have anything to say? Was your wife involved in any way, sir?
She has never been charged with murder.
I've never killed anybody.
And did I mention she was once a criminal defense attorney?
She knows all of this forensic stuff.
Seems to me Catherine enjoys all the intrigue and attention.
And then she proceeds to snip a lock of her hair and hand it to me and say, "I think you're probably gonna need this at some point."
No way.
What?
For a DNA sample.
That's a little cocky to me.
After nearly 20 years of pursuing Catherine, she finally agreed to talk with me again, even though she once said,
She's like, "I just wanted to let you know I seriously considered killing you, but I decided not to."
I'm a little nervous. I may throw up. Don't get that on camera. Am I crazy to do this? I have to admit, I'm really not sure what to think of Catherine and why she would even agree to talk to me. Maybe, just maybe, she feels guilty about something. You may have done some outlandish things to earn
Well,
your
there's
rep.
a little more than I've been telling, of course, but.
I've heard a lot of outrageous crime stories in my life, but nothing comes close to what's in these boxes. Assaults, arrests, trials, disbarments. Records and documents from years of Catherine Mahaffey Shelton's wild and mysterious life. But this is also really the story of my obsession with Catherine. It all started more than 20 years ago. I first met Catherine for a show I was producing for 48 Hours.
A special 48 Hours mystery.
On the controversy that has surrounded this defense attorney for decades.
Strange things have happened to the men in Catherine Shelton's life.
That bitch shot me.
In the years since, I've met her a few more times, and it's always been the same. She's coy, even playful. But often, I leave feeling confused. I wonder if she's not the cat and I'm the mouse she's just batting around.
I have done a few things, yes. I do admit that I've never stabbed anyone, all right? And I've never shot anyone with a shotgun.
Is she guilty of anything? Some things? Or is this all a coincidence? I've decided I'm going to look into it all again and see if I can dig up any new information. The goal? To meet with her one last time and see if I can get some answers. From the start, I knew I was going to need help. We have fraud, elder abuse, assaults, theft, tax evasion, fraud again, criminal mischief, shootings.
It's not black and white, but as you can tell from all these pictures and different cases on your table, that's a lot of coincidences.
That's Brian Benkin, a private investigator and now a defense attorney.
We're going to keep an open mind, no tunnel vision here.
And Lisa Andrews, a former prosecutor. They used to call her the Ice Queen.
But let's be real here. There are a lot of coincidences.
Both Brian and Lisa are consultants for 48 Hours. Like almost everyone in Houston, they've heard a lot about Catherine Shelton.
She's a legend around Harris County, because I almost go back 40 years down at the courthouse. And if you talk to any of the old prosecutors and defense attorneys from back in the day, they know all about Catherine.
They all know her name.
And they can tell you plenty of stories.
Catherine Mahaffey Shelton began practicing law in the 70s.
She was intelligent, she was very witty.
That's Gary Taylor. He was a newspaper reporter in Houston covering the courthouse. He got to know her pretty well.
She was well known around the courthouse because of the reputation she had, that she thought she was smarter than everybody else in the rest of the world. I knew that she was a tough gal. She decorated her home with stills from old Humphrey Bogart gangster movies.
He's going to be a much bigger part of this story later on. But listen to some other memories of Catherine.
I dare say probably the prettiest criminal defense lawyer in the Harris County courts.
Lloyd Oliver is a longtime attorney and a well-known figure around the Harris County courthouse.
She just had a vivacious personality, just charmed everyone.
I hadn't spoken to him in years, but we caught up with him recently, and he still had some crystal clear memories.
She had beautiful blonde hair, she was shapely, and she attracted men.
Lloyd and Catherine were friends.
How did you not fall prey to her charms?
We weren't involved romantically or physically. Where you can tell that is I'm still here, I'm still around. We're having this conversation right now. Some of her relationships turned pretty ugly, and when they said it was over, I remember her saying once, it ain't over till I say it's over. So if you were her boyfriend, you had to wait till she got ready to step away, apparently. Sometimes she'd just come unglued.
And as I was about to hear, some say you didn't necessarily have to be romantically involved with Catherine to see that side of her.
Hello?
Hi, is this Robert Pelton?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Robert. I'm here with Lisa Andrews and Brian Benkin.
I know them both very well. They're both fine lawyers.
They are. Well, they are helping me on a project about Catherine Mahaffey Shelton.
Oh, my God.
You remember her?
Yeah, I'm afraid I do. She tried to kill me when she was on trial, in trial.
Wait.
Which trial was she in?
Wait, what?
I knew I had to meet with him in person, so I tracked him down. Robert Pelton is a defense attorney.
I remember Catherine Mahaffey well.
He says he was in the courthouse back in 1980 when Catherine apparently had a very bad day. A fellow attorney took Pelton aside.
He said, Catherine said she's just taking sleeping pills or Valium. She's going to commit suicide. Will you take her in the hallway? I said, okay. The hallway the door was right there. There was a very small courtroom. And all of a sudden, Catherine grabs my tie and pulls me in and opens the door, and the judge's got a pistol laying on his desk, and the window's open on the 4th story of the courthouse building. She says, you're going to die with me. And she grabbed me, and I think, okay, in my mind, I think I'm either going to get shot or fall dead from the 4th story of the courthouse building.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, I was hollering, she was hollering, the bailiffs got the door open, I don't remember how, and got her, and of course, I was scared to death, and strapped Catherine down, as I remember, took her to the hospital on a stretcher, and come to find out she had not taken sleeping pills.
Do you think she was serious that day? Was she trying to kill you?
I would hate to think so. I think she had temporarily lost sight of her faculties. I think she was just scared and acting out. I'd hate to think she was trying to really do something bad to me, but I don't know. I mean, thank God, nothing. I never had to find out.
Catherine admits she went to the hospital that day and had her stomach pumped, but denies the rest of Pelton's account and says she never tried to hurt him. But that story was just one of the many swirling around her. And there were darker stories. Perhaps one of the darkest would involve an ex-boyfriend of Catherine's.
This one was a pretty brutal one, right up here through this gate.
He had been found murdered in his garage.
This is what we believe to be the first case linked to Catherine.
Oh, wow.
This is the location that I'm talking about right here. The first case linked to Catherine.
Which garage was it?
The second garage right here.
Okay.
They find him beaten to death in that
So in
garage
that
right
garage.
there. I mean, severely beaten to death.
The victim was a doctor, an anesthesiologist named George Tedesco. He and Catherine had once dated.
It's a crazy, crazy murder, and it's still unsolved.
Correct. And there's no statute of limitations. His Corvette was missing, but it didn't look like a regular robbery. Homicide detectives looked like it was something pretty personal.
There was actually a tire iron there, similar to this, that they believe was probably the weapon that was used. He suffered several skull fractures and hematoma. You know, he bled out from the beating that he took. These are some of the crime scene photos from that location.
Looking at the crime scene photos, I understood why it looked personal. But why couldn't it be just a robbery that may have turned violent? After all, his car was missing.
He still had jewelry on him. His wallet was still on him. You know, things of that nature that a person who's robbing you would probably take. And the other thing interesting about a scene, when people oftentimes when they're found dead in their garage, it's because it's somebody that knows that they're going to be there at a particular time.
The timing of Tedesco's murder was also curious.
Wasn't he supposed to show up in court for the lawsuit that
Yes.
Catherine filed against him, claiming they
Exactly.
were married, and then he was a no-show on the day of trial?
Tedesco was discovered murdered the day he was supposed to go to court in a dispute with Catherine. Detectives discovered that Catherine and Dr. Tedesco had been fighting for months. Catherine sued him for half his assets, claiming they were common law married. She said they had been together for a little over a year, but an investigator for Tedesco's family says they had only dated 3 or 4 months. The whole thing turned very ugly, with Tedesco alleging that Catherine made threatening phone calls, stalked him, and even committed burglary.
There seems to be a lot of rage in this crime. And so you might wonder, okay, was she strong enough to do this?
Was she still angry enough at him to do this?
Good questions, and we'll come back to this case in a second. But first, it's worth talking about the kind of trouble Catherine had with another boyfriend once they broke up.
It was god-awful. It was god-awful. It's the worst thing I've ever been through.
This is a lawyer named Ferris Bond. We talked with him when I was first reporting this story.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I wouldn't even wish it on her.
They dated in the 70s, and he says things started out fine.
She was a very pretty, petite little blonde girl, and she was available. We actually dated probably a period of months.
But Bond says after he saw her get into a fight with her roommate, he decided to get out.
It became clear to me that she had some violent tendencies, and I should try and get away from her.
But he said with Catherine, breaking up was hard to do.
Probably the worst thing was burning my apartment, all my possessions. Stole my automobile, shot at me with a shotgun.
No charges were ever filed against Catherine. When we spoke to her back then, she denied those allegations and didn't really want to talk about Ferris Bond. But she did admit she may be too much for some men to handle.
There are some sorts of men who are really, really offended by me. I think it's my propensity to probably say exactly what I think to them at a certain point when I just can't hold it in any longer.
To get away from her, Ferris Bond told us he joined the Marines.
Frankly, I didn't think that there was any way she'd follow me into the Marine Corps.
With that story in mind, we took a closer look at that Tedesco murder case and started digging a little deeper. We found out that after Dr. Tedesco was murdered, things got stranger fast. For starters, Catherine broke into the crime scene, claiming that she was retrieving some property that belonged to her.
After they found Tedesco's body, Catherine and an attorney that's representing her at the time, they actually get a locksmith. They go into his townhouse.
An attorney went with her to do that?
An attorney went with her.
She has an uncanny way of getting other folks, talking other folks into doing her bidding for her.
Sure.
And I'm no exception to the rules.
That attorney was Lloyd Oliver.
She talked, okay, let's go do it. So we went over there and I walked, couldn't get in, so called the locksmith, he lets us in.
I mean, that didn't raise any flags to you?
I don't know.
In a deposition later, Catherine admitted she took, amongst other things, a TV, pottery, $140 in cash, her driver's license, and an antique sword.
And what would ever make her think that that was a smart thing to do?
Right.
To go in there and remove property when a lot of people are going to think that it's a financial motive to begin with.
Right.
She's already trying to claim that she's the common law wife when everybody apparently in his family and said, no, they're not even close.
He was just beaten to death.
He's just beaten to death.
I just thought it was my stuff. I'm taking it.
She just does what she wants to do, right? She does what she wants to do and doesn't damn the consequences.
In that same deposition, Catherine claimed that Tedesco was involved in some illegal activity and was allegedly violent with her. But when we asked her about Tedesco back then, she didn't want to talk about him.
All right, so I have to question if she's upset about him being killed.
She wasn't in blubbering tears. I mean, she wasn't that upset.
Okay.
Like, she still had her wits about her.
All right.
And Catherine's wits are, she's pretty sharp.
There were many lingering questions about the case, and for some, red flags. The DA's office apparently thought there were red flags too, so they decided to secretly record some of Catherine's phone calls. Her anger at yet another ex-boyfriend was captured on tape.
Just calm down.
Got to beg for my mercy. He's hurting me. I've done nothing. I was trying to get away.
Well, leave him alone.
Ask me for mercy.
So I promised we'd get back to Gary Taylor. Remember him? He was the Houston newspaper reporter who covered the courthouse and Catherine. He first met her in 1979 after her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Tedesco, was murdered.
She was a hot item at the courthouse. She was intriguing, and because of the mystery of her past and the danger that seemed to be lurking underneath.
Gary says he was intrigued, and that intrigue turned into something else.
His relationship with her started because he was covering the Tedesco case, trying to get a story. So, like many of the men in her life back at that time, they started dating and having an affair, and you know, lines were blurred, I think, a little bit. It does seem like it was like party all the time back then. I mean, not that it's tame now at the Harris County Courthouse, but in the 70s, it's like all these wild parties.
It was a different atmosphere back then.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Gary was not shy about the details of this torrid affair.
He says, our roadmap to the bedroom was marked in scarlet letters from the moment we met.
Taylor even wrote a book about that time in his life. Listen to this.
She also had the hard look of a bad girl, and that played to my weakness. A menace? She just looked like fun to me.
I was looking for a little excitement in my life, and she certainly delivered in that category.
I talked with Gary Taylor about this years ago.
We had a sexual relationship that went on for about 4 weeks. And then I spent about 3 months trying to disengage from that relationship.
Catherine, by the way, disagrees with all of that. She doesn't even admit that they dated.
I don't consider him a relationship or anything. He's nothing. For a couple of months, he followed me around and went to court, followed me there.
Taylor told me Catherine came with some very sharp edges.
She's very abrasive, very aggressive, and she can walk into a room and have people arguing with her in a matter of minutes. She has a temper that comes out, and she can't always control it. You know, Tedesco's name was always coming up. I heard her say this to several people. You better do what I say. You know what happened to George. You know about George.
But Taylor says he really saw a scary side of her when he told her it was over.
One night we were, after I had told her we were going to have to break up, I saw her tear up a suitcase, and she tore it all to smithereens.
The association, such as it was broken off with some verbal acrimony.
Taylor says she once even put a pistol on her bedside table. He thinks just to remind him who was boss. With trouble now brewing between Taylor and Catherine, Taylor went to his friends in the DA's office. They were still investigating Tedesco's unsolved murder. It was suggested that he and his roommate could secretly record Catherine on the telephone. But when Catherine found out that Taylor was working with the DA, let's just say she wasn't pleased. Taylor's roommate called her and got her reaction on tape.
And you guys haven't heard this.
We have not heard
we've
this.
been dying to hear this.
So I'll just play a couple seconds of this for you.
He doesn't need to make a fool of me. God's sake! I've never killed anybody in my life. I've never really wanted to. But he's doing so much to me. Do you understand? He better stop. Now! He's got to beg for my mercy.
That stresses me out. And my understanding is back then, the friend of Gary's who recorded this played it in the press room for all the reporters, and she found out. So her anger at Gary was escalating.
And I didn't know how much violence would come down on me, but she had told me that I had entered, she was very dramatic, overly dramatic. She liked to tell me that I had entered the arena of death.
I think it made her angry so mad because in early January of 1980, she actually shows up at the press room where Gary works with other reporters, and my understanding just went crazy there and started throwing stuff around.
Taylor says Catherine started stalking him, following him on a date with another woman, approaching and scaring off another. Catherine, however, says that's not true, and he was the one pursuing her.
I don't think anything about him at all, except why doesn't he get a life?
But then Taylor says there was a burglary at his home, and that would lead to what he said was attempted murder.
She was holding the gun on me in a police position with both hands. I just threw the door open. I came at her with the chair. She fired one round.
This is where the next drama connected to Catherine happened, on a leafy street near downtown Houston. You guys know Gary Taylor is one of the men in Catherine's life over the years.
So it's my understanding, so at some part, Gary and her relationship start going south.
Gary Taylor says after he and Catherine ended things, someone broke into his apartment and stole some of his stuff. Catherine did not admit responsibility for the burglary, but Taylor says she did offer to help get his belongings back. A few years ago, Taylor told us about that night.
She insisted that I come over to her place and that she would have the stolen goods delivered over there.
When he got there, he says Catherine told him there was something for him in the bedroom closet. Taylor walked us through what he says happened next.
Yeah, she had told me that there was something for me in the closet. So I went back, I looked in the closet, and it was empty. I went in to make sure. As soon as I got in the closet, the lights went out. I heard her coming down the hall, and I heard a gun cock. And she stepped into the bedroom, and she backed up against a wall, and she took a policeman's position like this, with the pistol pointed at the closet. It looked like she was going to use it. She took a position across from me where I could use the door as a shield, and I could still peek out through the jamb here and watch her. Now, she looked different than I'd ever seen her. This was a new Catherine. There was like a hazy look in her eye, like she was in a far-off place. I had the door between us, and she started talking to me. And I remember she said, don't worry about the next life because there isn't one. Yeah, I thought, yeah, she's for real. And I tried to formulate a plan in my mind as to how to get out of here. There was a chair by the door. She looked down at the gun or something, and that's when I made my move. I just threw the door open. I came at her with the chair, like a lion tamer or something. She fired one round through the chair. I was vaguely aware of a bullet coming through the chair, and what I found out later was she fired off a round, the bullet came through the chair and nicked me right above the ear, right here. And I threw the chair at her. I ran down the hallway. When I got to the door, I stopped. I clicked the deadbolt, I opened the door, and that's when I felt the shot in the back. I was laying face down on the grass outside of her place. That bitch shot me. She shot me.
Taylor says he went to a nearby store and someone there called 911.
And they loaded me in the ambulance, and I guess they figured I was getting ready to die or something, because they said, tell us who shot you, tell us who shot you. And I said, Catherine Mahaffey, Catherine Mahaffey.
Taylor says he almost died that night, that the bullet came within a centimeter of his heart.
If she wanted me out of there, I was running down the hallway on my way out. She could have said, adios, but instead she shot me in the back. So I've got to believe that 1 and 1 equals 2.
The cops arrested Catherine. She told police that night that she was just protecting herself, that it was all self-defense.
There were a lot of facts that weren't favorable to her, like he was shot in the back. Right. They have to explain, why this was self-defense, but yet the victim is shot in the back. that gets kind of tricky to explain, and it gets hard to explain very credibly.
Although Catherine wouldn't share the specifics about what happened that night with us back then, she did seem to put the blame squarely on Gary Taylor.
I mean, if somebody had shot at me in their own home, which is really a violation of hospitality, I'd wonder what kind of a guest I was to merit that kind of behavior.
For the first time, Catherine was facing a serious charge, attempted murder. And then things in Catherine's life got more complicated. As if the Gary Taylor shooting wasn't enough, a few months later, another man linked to Catherine turns up dead. His name, Tommy Bell.
So many connections. That's crazy.
The Tedesco, Gary Taylor, Tommy Bell, all of those cases are very intertwined.
Yep.
You really have to pull the threads on all of those cases to make them all make sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Tommy Bell, it was a name I'd come across before, but I had no idea. I was about to discover some new clues about his very strange death. In early 1980, back at the courthouse in Houston, Catherine went on trial.
Okay, so she goes to trial pretty quickly on the Gary Taylor shooting, right?
Yeah, the shooting happens in January, and they go to the first trial in April of that same year, which is pretty quick.
She admitted she shot Gary Taylor, but maintained that it was self-defense.
And what happened? How'd that go?
Good for Catherine, because it was a hung jury, 7-5, 7 for guilty, 5 for not guilty. And I'm told that it was split along gender lines. The men went with Gary Taylor and the women went with Catherine.
At her second trial, she claimed Taylor had confronted her with a gun. She was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years, but she never served one day. Her conviction was overturned on appeal, and rather than go through a third trial, she agreed to plead guilty to aggravated assault and got probation. Catherine was temporarily barred from practicing law. Taylor says it didn't matter to him that she didn't go to prison.
I actually thought she would be in more agony if she couldn't practice law, because she reveled in this.
Catherine didn't care to elaborate on any of it.
I just can't think of anything to add to it that would make it anything more than it is, which was an unfortunate incident, certainly, and I'm glad no one was killed, including me. So I'll leave it at that.
But she did share another opinion on Gary Taylor.
I think of an oyster, just a gray, formless substance, shiny, but not with polish.
When we asked Catherine why she always seemed to be in the middle of a brewing storm, she had this to say.
I'm in the middle of life, and I'm supposed to work through this and work these things out, do the best I can. It's not for me to reason why.
But I would wonder why when I learned about another death, this second one that had a link to Catherine. Remember Dr. Tedesco? He's the ex-boyfriend who turned up beaten to death in his garage. A year before his murder, someone broke into his house. They stole some guns and art. A short time later, a man named Tommy Bell was arrested.
Tom Bell was arrested in New Jersey in possession of a number of these items, including some firearms that had serial numbers.
That's Kent Ferguson. He's a former FBI agent turned private investigator.
And they belonged to George Tedesco.
Then, after Tedesco was found murdered, Tommy Bell came into the picture again. This time, police wanted to talk with him because they thought he might be connected with the crime. Ferguson says Bell actually knew Tedesco. And as it turns out, Bell was once a client of Catherine's.
And when the police wanted to talk to Tom Bell about the murder of George Tedesco, she said that he couldn't, she was not going to allow her client to speak.
Catherine denies that Bell was a client of hers at that time. Tedesco's family, however, didn't wait for the criminal investigation to be over. They filed a wrongful death suit against both Catherine and Tommy Bell. They accused both of them of conspiring to kill the doctor. But the lawsuit never made it to trial, and neither did Tommy Bell.
So fast forward a very short amount of time, Tom Bell is found dead. Roommate said he was in there in his room by himself playing Russian roulette, shot himself in the head.
You don't play Russian roulette by yourself.
That was my first thought.
No.
Exactly.
But while I was looking through the police files on the case, I discovered something new.
So there are some investigators' notes that say the roommate, the one witness in the apartment to Bell's Russian roulette death, his fingerprints were actually on the gun that killed Bell.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we tracked down this investigator. He confirmed all of this. He remembers it all.
So when they found the roommate's fingerprints on the gun, was he questioned, I assume?
Yes, and he said, you know, when he heard the shot, he ran into the room, Tom Bell, his roommate's on the ground, and he moved the gun out of the way, so that's why his fingerprints were on there.
And wait, there was more, according to the investigator I spoke to. He claims the roommate had been dating Catherine. He told me how he found out about it.
He asked the roommate if he knew Catherine, and the guy goes, it's the weirdest story. There's this, you know, one night I'm on my way home, you know, several months back, and there's this little Mercedes by the side of the road, flat tire. So I stopped to help her, and her name was Catherine, and we started dating. We, you know, hit it off that night, and we started dating. And I'm like, what?
That's nuts.
Another coincidence.
That none of us knew until right now. I mean, this investigator knew it. He said, unfortunately, while they thought that was a pretty clear connection to all this craziness, they had no real evidence to go forward with.
Catherine told me she didn't even know the roommate. Neither of them were implicated in Bell's death. In the end, it was just another curious, unsettling situation. It's been a wild ride. A beating death, a shooting, a tape that some say sounds like The Exorcist,
He's got to beg for my mercy!
an odd Russian roulette death, and one woman with links to it all. A woman who seems to enjoy the intrigue surrounding her, and baiting me in particular. She once even offered me a sample of her hair for DNA.
What?
Catherine Shelton hair.
In case I wanted to compare it to something.
When you get to know me, you realize I don't have any interesting, bizarre, glittering life. Nothing. Nothing. Here it is. This is it. Believe you me, if there was anything going on, I'd know about it. I mean, my biggest thing around here is that I've got this bad cat.
I mean, maybe she didn't do any of it. That the reason we and law enforcement officers in Houston and Dallas over 40 years can't connect her is maybe she didn't do it.
Maybe
It's possible.
In the years to come, Catherine's conviction for shooting Gary Taylor would be set aside. But she would be linked to 3 more deaths. A young man discovered dead and naked in one of her homes. Another man shot dead in his driveway. His wife, a witness, claims Catherine was involved.
And I knew it was her. I know it was her. Catherine Shelton.
Not me. I wasn't there.
And yet another man died while he was staying with her. Come with me as I meet up with Catherine again after many years. Why am I doing this? Catherine once admitted she considered killing me. Was she joking? Did she mean it?
We'll see how she is today. I'm a little nervous. I may throw up. Don't get that on camera.
Will she finally put to rest all the questions about her?
48 hours to miss it would be a crime.
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
It was the loudest sound I'd ever heard because it was so close. So I'm thinking run in my head. I'm thinking Mike is shot. She steps from the back of the car and she screams, "Shoot her, shoot her again." I heard her voice. I heard her. Catherine Shelton.
Meet Catherine Shelton.
Get comfy, you're fine.
She says she had nothing to do with that shooting, but it's not the first time she's been accused of a crime.
Fraud, sexual offense, elder abuse, more fraud, arson.
I can go through all of them.
Homicide.
Some call this Texas woman a black widow. Men around her have died from unnatural causes.
But as you can tell from all these pictures and different cases on your table, that's a lot of coincidences.
My name is Jenna Jackson, and I'm a journalist. For nearly 20 years, Catherine's story has stayed with me. From a fiery 20-something right up until today, just about everywhere Catherine Shelton has gone, trouble has followed.
For some reason, I seem to have attracted people around me who themselves do not lead dull lives or are up to something.
An ex-boyfriend found beaten to death, case unsolved.
If you had to have a number one prime suspect, it's Catherine.
A man named with Catherine in a lawsuit was found with a bullet in his head. The circumstances around it, odd. There's another ex-boyfriend who Catherine actually admits shooting in the back. She says it was self-defense.
She was a lot of fun when she wasn't trying to kill me.
You guys tell me. And as you're about to hear, there's more.
This is where the case kind of goes from bad to weird.
A young man discovered hanging in a house she owned, dead and naked. His death ruled an accident.
I lead a dull life.
There's that husband and wife shot up in an ambush. The husband died, the wife survived, telling police her former boss was with the shooter.
I know it was her. I've worked with her. I've been in her home. Catherine Shelton.
Not me. I wasn't there.
And then there was an older man. He turned up dead, rolled up in a blanket in Catherine's house. She says he died of natural causes. She has never been charged with murder.
All right, for the record, I've never killed anybody, but I have done a few things, yes. I do admit that I've never stabbed anyone, all right? And I've never shot anyone with a shotgun.
Some say she knows how to beat the system. She is a former criminal defense attorney.
Maybe she didn't do any of this.
Maybe she's just really unlucky. It's all coincidence.
She may just be the most unluckiest person in the world.
Her story has become my obsession, to find the truth.
You know, I mean, do I look like I'm telling a big fat whopper?
After years of playing a cat and mouse game with Catherine Shelton, I've decided to meet up with her again and see if she's been holding on to any secrets. But before I do that, I got some help.
Hey, thanks for meeting me.
From a couple experts. They're both 48 Hours consultants. Lisa Andrews was a longtime prosecutor. She's now a defense attorney.
To hold somebody criminally responsible for something, you have to be able to prove it. And thus far, no one city, no one agency, no one has been able to prove even enough almost for an arrest.
These are some of the crime scene photos.
And Brian Benkin, a trial attorney and private investigator.
There's no question from what we know about her past prior to this that she's capable.
Right.
You know, the question is, what's the evidence?
The controversy surrounding Catherine Shelton started in the late 70s.
Okay, so let's recap what we know so far. She comes on the scene as a Houston criminal defense attorney. She's already got a reputation. She's connected to her ex-boyfriend, who she had filed common law marriage suit against.
The one who did not show up for the court appearance from the lawsuit that she filed was
Exactly.
found beaten to death in his garage.
That is still unsolved, and we feel like there are so many unanswered questions there. They all sort of go in a circle here. And then she is charged with shooting another ex-boyfriend, Gary Taylor, a reporter here in Houston.
Who she actually got convicted for.
And that's the only thing she's ever been convicted of, right?
Right.
And only got probation.
And of course, there was a second death we talked about. It was Tommy Bell. He was named with Catherine in a wrongful death lawsuit and was later found with a bullet in his head. Investigators say Bell shot himself playing Russian roulette. Catherine was never implicated in Bell's death, but it added to her reputation as a woman with a past.
All right? Okay, cool. Thanks. Bye.
And there were other old allegations of harassment, burglaries, and so forth that never got to court. But now, let's move to the next chapter in Catherine's life. In 1981, Catherine left Houston and married a small-town Texas boy named Clint Shelton. His family owned a gun shop, and he happened to be an expert marksman. Catherine told us what attracted her to him when I started covering Catherine.
The law and Mrs. Shelton.
For a 48 Hours report set for 2003.
He just seemed like a, kind of a man of the West type person.
Clint's dad, Richard, didn't care for Catherine.
She's intelligent. Don't think she's not intelligent. And she's mean to go with it. She's a bitch. 18 karat.
Catherine and Clint would later move up to Dallas. She eventually convinced a judge to set aside her conviction for shooting Gary Taylor. After her probation was lifted in 1988, she got her law license back and opened a practice.
What I try to do is get justice for the people who come to me.
Things were relatively quiet for about a decade until a third man's death had a link to Catherine in June 1999.
So let's talk about the next case, Chris Hansen.
This is where the case kind of goes from bad to weird.
Chris Hansen was doing some contracting work for Catherine in her new home. He was here in the States from Canada.
It's our understanding that, she was doing some immigration work for him.
Mr. Hansen was found in a home that she had yet to move into, but it belonged to her, found by her husband, Clint Shelton.
Hansen was found hanging in a closet area of the home. He was naked. According to newspaper reports at the time,
it was ruled an accident again. This time, instead of by Russian roulette, It was ruled accident by autoerotic asphyxiation.
In her house.
In her house.
So have you guys seen those kind of cases before?
Not in somebody else's house.
Right. I mean, they happen, but this is pretty unusual.
Hanson's death may have been unusual, but the next one with a link to Catherine was right out of a movie.
The lady lay on my front porch has been shot twice. Okay, do you know who shot her? Shelton, you have anything to say? Was your wife involved in any way, sir?
So we're back in Dallas. She's working as a defense attorney. Several months after Chris Hanson's body is found in her house.
And this is a really big one.
Yeah.
Sensational, newsworthy, lots of media coverage, and a big deal in Dallas.
So this happened in Rowlett, Texas, and on December the 20th, 1999, there's a 911 call.
Hello. Hello. There's a lady lay on my front porch has been shot twice. Okay, do you know who shot her? No, ma'am.
The 911 caller didn't know who had shot Marissa Hierro, but Marissa says she knew immediately who was involved. Her old boss, Catherine Shelton.
She's saying, please help me, they're still chasing me. She's saying that somewhere down the way her husband's been shot.
Marissa had recently quit working for Catherine and had opened her own immigration consulting business. Catherine, she says, went ballistic. The two women soon began accusing each other of scamming their clients.
She was threatening me. She was screaming at me.
We spoke with Marissa in 2003.
She's screaming, "You won't live to see Christmas." I mean, she said it exactly like that.
Catherine denies that she ever threatened Marissa, but Marissa says she was worried. She knew what happened to Chris Hanson, the man that had been found hanging in a home Catherine owned. Marissa says she knew him and claims he had a beef with Catherine.
He called my office about 30 days before he had passed. He had told me that she was taking money from him. I told him to go to the police. He told me he was afraid to go to the police because, he wasn't a citizen. He had Canadian citizenship or something.
Marissa says Hanson had wound up dead not long after. His death ruled an accident. Then, that December evening, all hell broke loose for Marissa and her husband Michael outside their home.
We pulled around to the back. Mike's about to get out. All of a sudden, he just snapped over and he grabbed my arm and he just said, "Oh no." So I looked to see what he's looking at, and he's telling me, "Just run. Don't worry what you hear. Just go. Run." I could just see from the neck down. I couldn't see any face. And I could see someone just holding something like this. And I know now, when I'm looking, it's confirming in my head that this is someone holding a gun. It was the loudest sound I'd ever heard because it was so close. I mean, you think about it now and you think he should have ran him over. He should have done something different. He should have pulled forward and slammed into the garage. He should have done something other than get out.
Marissa says she could see two masked figures, one person with a gun, a man, the other a woman, petite with blonde hair.
I'm running. I'm not even thinking that I can even get fast enough away. So I stood, and I never forget because I saw it's like a fire leaving a gun. And the only thing I could think of to do, I guess, was lift up my hand. I know when I was shot and I landed forward, I landed face down.
Marissa says as the two masked figures stood over her, the woman was giving the shooter orders. She says she recognized Catherine by her voice.
She said, "Don't be a to him." I said, "Do it." And he's told her, I did. I shot her. And she said, "Do it again." When he argued and said I did it, I just heard them leave.
Marissa had been hit. Buckshot from the blast tore into her arm. She was seriously wounded. Her husband, Michael, lay dead in the driveway.
When the police get on the scene, the first things I say, Catherine Shelton.
In spite of Marissa's witness account, Catherine was never arrested. She had an alibi. Her lawyer says phone records show that Catherine was talking on her cell phone and then home phone with a friend and her mother at the time of the shooting. But her husband, Clint, was arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. Police had found 2 latex gloves and a mask made out of pantyhose in a porta potty on a construction site near the murder scene. Clint's DNA was on the mask.
And so many people have said, you know, Catherine has this ability to pull people in and to help her. So
Yeah.
Clint, been married to her for several years, you know, he's just sucked into this and sure, baby, I'll go along with you and shoot your paralegal and her husband. Why not? I mean,
That's just incredible
kind
to
of the
me.
way it looks, though.
And that's the way it looked to the prosecutors as well.
I sat through it 20 years ago.
Right.
Sat through that entire murder trial. The prosecutor's case was Clint did this, and whether Catherine was at the scene or not, she orchestrated it. He
Okay.
said that. That was his case.
It had to be his case because Clint had no motive on his own to
Catherine
do this.
had the- I
Catherine
agree.
had the motive.
In 2000, Clint Shelton was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for gunning down the Hierros. We spoke to him a few years into his sentence.
I did not murder or attempt to murder anyone, and I was not there that night.
Catherine insisted neither of them had anything to do with it.
I don't know anything about it.
Marissa would later sue Catherine for wrongful death. The case was eventually dropped.
This started out to be a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Marissa against me for killing her husband. It has turned into something else.
That's because Catherine would then countersue, saying Marissa had falsely blamed her and her husband Clint for the crime, and that all of her claims were untrue. The trial was unusual. Marissa and her lawyer didn't show up, so Catherine won by default. The ruling? Marissa libeled Catherine by accusing her of murder. But Catherine was still ready to fight for damages.
And the worst thing, she says in here, this thing says I'm a coward.
Well, let me ask you.
My father wasn't a coward. My mother wasn't a coward.
The judge seemed impressed.
I think it was a very well tried case, very well explained. Your arguments are well supported. And
Guess what? The judge awarded Catherine millions of dollars in damages.
She needs to find a job, and we hope she'll stay at it for at least 30 or 40 years, because that's how long it's going to take to pay for all this.
Catherine was angry at Marissa, and as I'm about to tell you, she would also become furious with me. I got a bodyguard. November 2003. I was a little concerned. Catherine was angry with me. Very angry.
Strange things have happened to the men in Catherine Shelton's life.
Catherine Shelton's saga hit national airwaves with our 48 Hours report.
Do you hurt other people?
Well, I don't intend to.
I thought she said all this on camera. She had to know what the show was going to look like. There's all these bodies. At the time, my boss at CBS was really nervous that Catherine would try to kill me. So my boss hired a bodyguard to follow me around. 3 months after the show airs, Catherine calls my cell phone, says, "Hey, this is Catherine." I'm like, "Hey, Catherine." I get little butterflies in my stomach at that point. And she's like, "I just wanted to let you know I seriously considered killing you, but I decided not to." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." Click.
Around 2012, I left the business. But as it turns out, it hadn't left me. Catherine Shelton was always there, in the back of my mind. I found out she had been disbarred since the last time I saw her, but what else had she been up to? I wanted to talk to her again, so in 2016, I called her. So I think we have to get your audio back on. You look amazing. Not only did she take my call, but she agreed to meet with me again.
What time is it? It's 11 o'clock, too early for mimosas.
It was the start of a years-long, complicated relationship.
Who am I to judge someone's soul?
I have mixed feelings about her. You haven't seen them since all this craziness.
Not except at their depositions.
I find her smart, wily, and at times even funny.
But look, this top does not work with the muffin top.
But she gets very serious when one particular subject comes up.
There's a man in prison who doesn't deserve to be there. His name is Catherine Shelton.
All these years later, Catherine is still standing by her man. Even as Clint Shelton was serving out his life sentence for the murder of Michael Hierro.
And everybody who knows him knows that it's not him, that it's impossible.
Catherine was determined to exonerate Clint. My curiosity was piqued. I was able to get my hands on hundreds of pages of police reports that we didn't have access to when we originally covered this story. Over the next few years, I went through them whenever I had the chance to see if there was something that had been missed. So you guys know, the team also took a look.
I think everyone would agree, he did not have a motive.
In the end, it seems that the best chance Clint Shelton had to help himself was Catherine. Tell me from your experience, if you're defending him, what's our best case to say Clint didn't do this? It makes no sense.
You make this case about Catherine Shelton.
Lisa says the easiest way to get Clint off the hook would be for him to blame Catherine.
You talk about all the crazy deaths before he ever met her. And then you paint her as this psycho who gets mad and lashes out in anger.
But that hasn't happened. Clint has never even suggested Catherine had anything to do with the shooting.
Was your wife involved in any way, sir?
He's been in the penitentiary without anything because he wouldn't do what they wanted him to do, the prosecutor and the state. Which was give me up.
And Catherine still swears she wasn't responsible for the shooting either. But for the first time, she shared that she had doubts.
At one point I thought, well, maybe I did do it. Maybe I blacked out and did it. And I talked to the psychologist who worked with my clients. I said, look, I keep feeling like so many people can't be wrong, you know? And he said, it's impossible. I was talking to you like when it was happening on the phone.
So who does Catherine believe was behind the ambush plot? Marissa Hierro.
She was directly responsible. Even if she did not herself pull the trigger, she made it happen.
It's an accusation she's made before. Catherine says Marissa had been running an immigration scam, basically taking money from immigrants who wanted green cards. Attorneys who represented some of Marissa's former clients told us she did little or nothing for the money they paid her. Catherine says Marissa's husband was about to rat her out.
I know Michael was inconvenient to her. Maybe she thought if she got rid of him, that she was just really going places, and he knew too much.
We couldn't find Marissa today, but at the time when we asked her about these allegations, she denied them. And she also denied Catherine's accusation that she was the one who set up her husband's murder.
Have I always done the best thing in life? Said the right thing, made the best choices? No. But have I ever hurt anyone? No. Would I ever hurt Michael? Never. Never.
But Catherine says she's got one more reason Clint couldn't have been the shooter. The gun. That is a pretty powerful weapon.
It is. It's a scary weapon. It's not a safe weapon. The weapon that was used at the crime scene on that night was a sawed-off shotgun 12-gauge. They used buckshot.
Tony Leal is a former chief of the Texas Rangers. He knows guns.
A shotgun is made to spread several projectiles. so that when it shoots, it goes out the front of that barrel and steadily increases its width. So when you're not experienced in weapons, a shotgun is a very good weapon. You don't have to know how to really shoot a gun.
He had probably 1,200 guns, and he was just a very, very good shot.
Catherine says her husband was a marksman and a gun expert. He would never use a crude weapon like that.
The weapon was nothing like what Mr. Shelton would have used if he was going to shoot anything.
But Leal says Catherine's argument cuts both ways.
If I was planning a murder that I wanted to get away with, we need to make this look like we didn't do it to throw off investigators. It's not a bad plan.
We spoke to the former prosecutor on the case, Toby Shook, who is now a defense attorney. He says Clint Shelton is exactly where he belongs and that Catherine is still considered a person of interest in the shootings. He also says he doesn't believe Marissa Hierro had anything to do with her husband's murder.
Lots of files over the years.
Catherine's efforts to free Clint seem like a long shot. But since she's talking to me again, I wonder, will she talk about other cases?
We've got arson accusations, murder accusations, beating, shooting, theft, and who knows what else.
What about Gary Taylor,
She was a lot of fun when she wasn't trying to kill me.
the ex-boyfriend she shot in the back?
He had said, you know, you and I would both be better off dead. And I thought, well, maybe you know, but not me.
Here we go, on our way to pick up Catherine for an interview. We will see how it goes. You never can tell. It's always an adventure.
After our reunion in 2016, I met up with Catherine a few more times, and she told me bits and pieces about the allegations against her. But I felt like she was holding back.
You know, I mean, how could I know that?
But now, in 2022, she told me she has more to say.
What do you think she's ready to talk about?
I think she wants to set the record straight and correct some things that have been said about her for, God, 30 plus years now.
And after re-examining this case so carefully, I think I'm ready to face her again, too.
Where are you? Ready?
I thought I'd start by asking her about a man she's never wanted to talk much about. A man she once cuttingly described as an oyster.
I know you remember this because you've had to hear about it for years and years.
Yes.
Remember the night that everything went down with Gary Taylor. I want to walk you through what he says happened, and I want you to tell me what happened, okay?
Gary Taylor is that newspaper reporter who told us about his torrid relationship with Catherine that ended in an ugly breakup. Amongst other things, Taylor accused Catherine of burglarizing his apartment. Catherine did not admit responsibility for the burglary, but according to Taylor, she did offer to help get his belongings back. When Taylor went to her home, what he got instead was a bullet in his back. In 2003, Taylor walked us through what he says happened that night with Catherine.
She insisted that I come over to her place and that she would have the stolen goods delivered over there.
After he got there, he says Catherine told him there was something for him in her bedroom closet.
I looked in the closet and it was empty. I went in to make sure. As soon as I got in the closet, the lights went out. And I heard a gun click. I knew she was out there.
Taylor says he looked through the crack where the door hinges were, and there was Catherine.
And she stepped into the bedroom and she backed up against a wall and she took a policeman's position like this with the pistol pointed at the closet. And I had the door between us. Now she looked different than I'd ever seen her. This was a new Catherine. And she started talking to me. She said, don't worry about the next life because there isn't one. And she looked down at the gun. And that's when I made my move, and I kicked open the door. I grabbed the chair. I went straight at her with the chair, like a lion tamer or something. She fired off a round. The bullet came through the chair and nicked me right above the ear, right here. And I threw the chair at her. I ran down the hallway.
Okay, well, his version of what happened that night was bull.
Catherine denies even dating Taylor and claims he was only around because he was writing a story about her, hoping to revive his career.
I had news for that boy. I did have some passionate thoughts about someone, but it sure wasn't him.
What Catherine told me was that after a night out drinking, Taylor went to her home for a nightcap. She says Taylor made himself a drink in the kitchen and then came back into the living room holding one of her guns.
I said, "That's not loaded." And he said, "It is now."
Catherine says she tried to divert Taylor toward her bedroom closet.
I said, "Those things that you want, they're in the closet up on the top shelf." I thought I could kind of go around him, but no, he has me go in front of him back to the room. And he reaches for this wooden chair to pull it over to get up. You know, it was 9 feet. And I thought, now is your only chance. And I knew I had another gun under the bed. And I just started saying, "Oh, please, Gary, don't kill me," whatever. And I went down on my knees, you know, like this. Just, it was happening contemporaneous with him moving the chair. I reached under, pulled it out, stood up, turned, shot him like this with one hand, because that's how I shoot, with one hand. Not like this, but turn your body to the side and shoot as close as you can.
What happened then?
He had lifted the chair at the same time. The chair is then rocketed out across the room because I shot through the chair. And the bullet bounced off his head. And he yelled, turned, and ran. And I kept shooting. I shot him out the door.
You chased him out the door?
Yep. And the second shot hit him in the back.
She blew me out through the door, and I was laying face down on the grass outside of her place. And I was so off.
He says that came 2 centimeters close to his heart. He
It didn't
nearly
even
died.
penetrate the body cavity, all right? It was in the soft tissue of his back, the fat muscle. He was treated and released quickly from Bentop Hospital that night.
Catherine insists that she shot him in self-defense. By the way, her claim that Gary pointed a gun at her was one she had made before at trial. We spoke to Taylor recently, and he denies that he held a gun on Catherine and says he's sure Catherine meant to kill him that night. So Catherine has told us her side of what happened with Gary Taylor that night. But what about all the other rumors and accusations in her life?
I've known a lot of criminal defense attorneys, and not all of them have this trail of bodies kind of in their wake that they've been accused of, right?
And she'll also have to explain the most recent death she has a link to. A 5th one.
Why would I have killed him?
It's so hard to pull Catherine into focus. Is she tired of the accusations that have swirled around her for decades?
People who really know me, they know I'm not that way. I mean, who could be and live so long?
Or is part of her amused by all the attention?
Yep, I hear them. The sirens in the background.
They're here for me.
They found you.
They finally located me. It's taken them 40 years.
So for 40 years, there have been some pretty crazy accusations thrown at you. Some
Yes, a few.
cases linked to you. Murder.
You mean that I knew the people? Yes.
Arson, murder, fraud.
Burning, robbery, general mayhem.
So why? Why are all these things being said about you every which way you go? I mean, have you done all these things?
If I had done a tenth of what has been said about me, I'd be dead. Right?
Have you ever murdered anyone?
Murder accusations, it's really been people throwing mud at the wall and hoping some of it will stick.
Remember, Catherine was never charged with murder, but she has links to 2 men who met a violent end. The first man was that ex-boyfriend, Dr. George Tedesco, found bludgeoned to death in his garage on the day he was supposed to go to court in a dispute with Catherine. The other man was Michael Hierro, shot to death in his driveway. His wife, who was also shot and survived, had been in a dispute with Catherine as well.
Myself, I have never killed any human being. I have never paid anyone to kill any human being, promised anyone that I would pay them to kill another human being, offered anyone anything of value.
As for those other mysterious deaths, there was Tommy Bell, the man who was named with her in a wrongful death suit.
He had killed himself or shot himself while playing Russian roulette, watching a Clint Eastwood movie.
She still denies that she had anything to do with it, but she did seem skeptical about the Russian roulette story.
It'd be kind of hard to envision somebody harming themselves that took care of their body, and their nutrition.
Right. And she also told us she doesn't know anything about Chris Hansen's death. He was the contractor who turned up dead and naked in a house she owned. But why do these rumors follow her around? Catherine thinks the reason may be because she was always known for being a force to be reckoned with.
I had somewhat of a track record of, if you hit me once, I'll hit you twice, that I was taught to take up for myself, and I did.
But that reputation, she says, took on a life of its own after the Tedesco murder. Catherine says she used it to build her legend.
I played off a lot of that. And after the first incidents of the outrage of George Tedesco, people would, sometimes look at me and I thought, well, I'll just use this to my advantage, And so if I'd look at them or something like that, or, I'd see that they'd go crazy, or something.
So you played it up?
Yeah, I did.
Although Catherine insists she never murdered anyone, she does admit to some violence when she needed to defend herself.
But you have done some violent things.
Oh, yes, and I would if someone put their hands on me.
Catherine, however, says that she's softened with age, at least a little.
It used to be, you'll only do that once. Now I'm trying to be, follow Jesus and everything a little better. I'm a Catholic. And so now the rule is, all right, you have to do it twice, but then I'll beat the crap out of you.
Catherine says she wants to put her past behind her, but there is now a new death with a link to her. The latest case was that of a 70-year-old man named Sam Shelton, no relation to Catherine. He was ill, she says, and in 2017, he was living in her house.
He was in pretty bad shape. He was on oxygen, a lot of oxygen, a lot of oxygen. He couldn't even move without a big tank with him.
Catherine says she took him in because he was a veteran and had no family around. He didn't last long.
He lived for, after I met him in March or April, I have to count my fingers. June, July, August, September, August. He died in August. He only lived 5 months. And he might have lived a little longer, except the storm.
That storm was Hurricane Harvey. It came blasting through Houston that August. Catherine says Sam died of natural causes during the storm. There was nowhere to take him.
And I tried to wrap him up in blankets, and I thought, at least here it's cold, and he may have to stay here with me in the house, until they can come get him. So I didn't know what else to do.
But it's what Catherine did next that got her in trouble. She signed his name on a lease application after he was dead to try and rent a house. She got caught.
The DA's office didn't want to take it at first, And then they said, well, it's only a misdemeanor. And
Fraudulent use of identifying information, felony. Bottom line, Catherine is currently charged with a felony, and she's facing trial. She could even go to prison for up to 10 years.
I'm not going to prison. I haven't done anything wrong.
But how are you so sure? You're facing this case right now. It's pending
Well, I
as we
can't
sit
give
here.
away my defense. I mean, it's not a good case for a prosecutor. It's not a thin case. It's a case that can't be proven.
Catherine says she has a reason for signing the dead man's name on that document. She says she was just trying to get a new home for the elderly man's nurse and her family. According to Catherine, they lost their home in the storm. It's so hard to sort this all out. And after all this, I still can't make up my mind about her.
How would you describe your life?
Well, I certainly never expected it to be how it was. Actually, I would like to have been a librarian. That was what I really wanted to do.
Has your life turned out like you thought it would?
Well, no, I haven't been a librarian, so it didn't work out. I'm who I am, period. And that's just how the cards are dealt. You've got to play the hand you're dealt. And with a few moans and groans and, missed moves, I've played the hand I was dealt.
Do you have anything to confess? Have you told us the truth about everything?
Anything that I've had to confess, I've confessed in the past. It's done. The confession is done.
No murder.
I haven't, not yet I haven't. So anyway, you never know.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode."
The Binghamton area, Broome County, has 200,000 people. We have our share of major crimes and 5 or 6 homicides a year. I've represented many families at the DA's office of victims of crime. I promise them that I will work as hard as I can to do everything that I can to get justice.
Who was Haley Anderson? How would you describe her?
Haley, is a typical college student.
Everyone needs to try on my glasses.
By everybody's account, a very sweet, fun, energetic person.
Oh, you look so cute!
I mostly remember her laugh. And just her presence.
Look who I found!
She was always the one who was the most sensitive and supportive friend ever.
As a mother, I know what it's like to have your child go off to college.
Yeah. I mean, it was sad, and we dropped her off, and obviously, I cried.
In college, you go through so many different changes. You're away from your family, you're learning who you are as an adult, and you make mistakes. A guy that you meet in a class could be so different outside.
Tell me about Orlando.
Orlando is charismatic, knows just how to push your buttons in the right playful way to get you to laugh and have fun with him. He definitely liked Haley. I'd say they were a good match just because they both were very good at having fun and kind of life's of the party. They both were very good at being social, having friends. They were both compassionate, understanding people.
Haley and her roommates were spending some time together, drinking a little wine, playing some board games, and just kind of enjoying an evening.
Stayed up pretty late.
And when you woke up the next morning, did you look for Haley?
Yeah, I texted her that morning. She didn't answer. I figured she was still asleep. She loves sleeping.
Nobody really saw or heard from her the entire day. There were several attempts to contact her by phone, and she didn't return those calls, which they thought was peculiar, but it really didn't seem to be an issue.
We weren't super worried at that point because, you know, Haley's a big girl. We don't need to keep tabs on her. She had told me that she was gonna come watch me read poetry at poetry night that Thursday. And then she didn't show up, and we were all calling her, and she didn't answer. It was the next morning. We just were like, this doesn't make sense.
When did you find out that both Haley and Orlando were missing?
Friday, March 9th. The first thing I thought was maybe they had eloped.
The police received 2 calls within the hour. And the first call was from Orlando Tercero's sister. And she asked them to go check on the welfare of Orlando.
A patrol officer came here. At that point in time, there was no answer at the door, and the vehicle that we believed him to be operating was not present.
One of my roommates was just like, I've located her phone on Find My Friends, and it says it's at Orlando's house.
Why did you decide to climb in the window?
Because we were knocking on all the doors and no one was answering.
Did you fear what you could find when you would go into the apartment?
I was definitely afraid of what I would find.
When Binghamton University student Haley Anderson first disappeared from her off-campus apartment, her close friend and roommate, Josie Arton, says she wasn't that alarmed.
When I first didn't hear from her, I didn't think, oh, something terrible has happened.
It was early March 2018, and back in Haley's hometown of Westbury, New York, her mother, Karen Anderson, didn't even know her 22-year-old daughter was missing.
I didn't talk to her every day because she was like, Mom, can you call me every Sunday? I said, okay.
Haley was always fiercely independent, says Karen.
Oh, she's such a free spirit. She was a millennial hippie. The way she dressed, her hair, her personality, the way she was with her friends. She trusted everybody. She talked to everybody.
Haley was a straight-A student at Binghamton University when she was accepted into their nursing program. It meant an extra year of school, but Haley didn't mind. In March 2018, graduation was just around the corner, and so was a nursing job back home. Karen was about to have her daughter close again.
She had worked so hard and done so well, and I was going to give her a big party. She made up this really long list of everyone that she was going to invite.
She's always wanted to be a nurse more than anything. For her, it was a chance to help other people.
Kevin Ocampo, also a Binghamton student at the time, was Haley's on-again, off-again boyfriend.
Did you love her?
Yes,
Did you think that you might end up together?
definitely.
But Haley made it clear, first, she needed to graduate and experience some real freedom.
She always wanted to move to California, get a hippie van, be out on the road kinda, and like freelance and work as a nurse.
And while still at school, Haley wanted to be free to date others. Orlando Tercero was born in Miami and grew up in Nicaragua. A good student from a well-to-do family, he was also in the nursing program.
His dad was a physician, and I believe that Orlando got the drive to be a nurse through his father's career.
Jesse Bua, a nursing student himself, was one of Orlando's roommates and best friends.
He liked to work hard in school during the weekdays. On the weekends, he liked to go out, have a few drinks, meet up with some friends. Always liked to dance, also kind of similar to Haley in that sense.
Haley and Orlando first met in class, but didn't forge a friendship until Haley's 4th year at school, when they crossed paths at a party at Kevin's off-campus apartment.
It was just coincidence that they met in my apartment. Haley recognized him, and so she introduced me to him.
Orlando, Haley, and Kevin grew closer. Kevin even invited his new friend to join his fraternity.
We tried to recruit people who we think we would get along with well. And being that we were both from Hispanic backgrounds, me and him were the only two people that spoke Spanish. So I thought it'd be a good idea.
And for a while it was, until Kevin and Haley took one of their breaks and Orlando crossed the line in his friendship with Haley.
They had some romantic times together, but Haley was very clear from the beginning that she didn't want to be in a committed relationship.
Haley and Orlando now had their own on-again, off-again relationship.
Sometimes they were bickering, sometimes they weren't. Other times they would laugh hysterically and I could hear from my room when she would stay over. And other times they kept their distances and wouldn't see each other for a little bit.
But as everyone told us, Haley never completely turned her back on Orlando, especially after his fraternity brothers pushed him out for sleeping with her because she was Kevin's girlfriend.
I think Haley felt guilty for that.
Did he make her feel guilty?
Yes, I found that out. Yes, he made her feel guilty.
How?
Orlando would say, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself."
Josie says Orlando started coming around uninvited.
He used to stop by a lot to come smoke a cigarette on our porch. He definitely used to drive by.
And how would Haley react when he showed up?
Haley, usually I would deal with it for her.
You did?
Yeah, because it's hard for her to be like to her friend, you need to leave, this is not appropriate. So there were nights where I would have to go out and be like, Orlando, you need to leave, you can't just show up at our house.
Why do you think he did that?
Because he was jealous. He just didn't want to see someone else over there.
You think Orlando was obsessed with Haley?
Yeah, for sure. He was clearly weirdly possessive of Haley, who wasn't his girlfriend.
He definitely liked Haley. He definitely seemed like he wanted it to be a little bit more than just an on and off fling.
Then there was this big red flag.
Slashed every single one.
Haley posted this Snapchat video announcing the tires on her car had been slashed. Her childhood friend, Sydney Matuzak, was a few hundred miles away when she saw the post and saved it.
I just what just happened? Why would anyone do that? How crazy do you have to be to slash someone's tires?
It happened the day after a party at Orlando's apartment, where he learned that Haley and Kevin were on again.
I was the one who found her tires slashed.
Kevin had spent the night at Haley's.
We wake up, she walks me out of the door, and this time when I was walking past her car, I noticed that something looked off about it.
Slashed every single one.
And I told her right away, I said, it must be Orlando.
Orlando denied it and even tried to blame Kevin, but Karen Anderson didn't buy it.
So you're pretty convinced that it was Orlando who slashed her tires?
Oh, absolutely. I said, Haley, you need to make a police report. So the police came over, they took the information down, but she wouldn't press charges because it was over $600 in damage and it would have been considered a felony and he would have been kicked out of the nursing school.
For a while, Haley kept her distance from Orlando, but despite warnings from her family and friends, she eventually let him back into her life.
It was a red flag for you, but not necessarily for Haley.
No, right. She trusted him.
Nearly 6 months after her tires were slashed, Haley went missing. even off Snapchat. Josie and another roommate named Michelle tracked Haley's iPhone to Orlando's apartment and then climbed through a window in search of their friend.
I boosted Michelle up first and then climbed in. And she was a little ways ahead of me, and basically she screamed and yelled to me like, "Josie, call 911." And I walk in there, and then I see Orlando's bedroom, and Haley is there. I didn't know for sure that she was dead at the time. She just was so pale, you know.
Haley had been strangled to death, and Orlando III was nowhere to be found. On the afternoon of March 9th, 2018, Karen Anderson noticed two men in a black car parked outside of her house.
And they get out of the car, and they walk up to the door, and they sat me down at the table, and they said Haley's name. And then they said suspicious activity. And so I was like, ugh. I just kept staring at him, and it wasn't processing. And I said, "What do you mean?" And then they told me.
Her daughter Haley had been found strangled to death in Orlando's bed.
I was just numb. I felt angry that I didn't push for them to be arrested for that tire slashing, and that I didn't, raise more red flags for Haley with that.
Slashed every single one.
Binghamton Police Lieutenant Corey Minor led the search for Haley's suspected killer.
So this is the house that Orlando lived in?
That is correct. There's several different cameras on the house. Those cameras were utilized to track not only Miss Anderson's movements around the property, but also Mr. Tercero's throughout the day of March 8th and March 9th.
The first recording of interest to police was on Thursday, March 8th in the early morning hours, when Haley met up with Orlando.
The camera on the front of the house shows Miss Anderson and Mr. Tercero walking into the residence on March 8th. And after Miss Anderson walks into the house, she is never seen again. Mr. Tercero, on the other hand, he is seen leaving the residence several times.
Nearly 7 hours after arriving with Haley, Orlando is seen clearing the driveway of garbage and leaving alone. Using a receipt they found in his apartment, police tracked his movements to a local pharmacy where he purchased ZzzQuil and melatonin, 2 sleeping aids. Orlando then returned to his apartment, where security cameras didn't pick him up for another 7 hours. But when they did, he didn't go very far, says then Broome County District Attorney Stephen Cornwell.
You could see he's walking in the direction of where the basement is.
Investigators believe Orlando tried to hang himself in his apartment using hooks that were stored in the basement. But in his failed attempt, they believe he fell and hurt himself.
You can see some blood on the floor. You can see a tie hanging from a doorway.
Detectives also found a note written in Spanish, which begins, "Lamento mucho esto. I'm really sorry about this. I never felt I could be capable of doing this." He also wrote, "Papi, te veo pronto. Father, I'll see you soon." His father had passed 5 years earlier. Investigators thought it read like a killer's confession and suicide note. But 16 hours before Haley's body was discovered, Orlando left his apartment one last time with his luggage and drove over 3 hours to New York's JFK airport with his head bandaged, possibly from that alleged suicide attempt. Orlando boarded a plane and headed home to Nicaragua.
When I learned he was in Nicaragua before we could get to him, the first thing I thought was, no way, he got away with murder.
It was now up to Nicaraguan authorities to capture a fugitive with dual citizenship.
I don't know what our relationships are with Nicaragua, but if he fled there and we don't have a way to get him back because he has dual citizenship, this is not going to be good.
Maria Elena, welcome to Managua.
Thank you.
A 48-hour team traveled to Managua, Nicaragua, with the help of risk advisor Nick Copeland and Nicaraguan journalist Alfonso Flores to retrace Orlando's steps, starting with where he landed.
Who picked him up at the airport in Nicaragua?
To this day, I don't know.
48 Hours has learned that it was his mother who picked Orlando up at Managua's International Airport and drove him about 3 hours north to their hometown of Chinandega.
So today we'll be leaving from Managua.
We decided to drive to Orlando's hometown as well, mindful of the political unrest and animosity toward the media in the countryside.
I'd advise the high-risk team, so just be cautious there.
For several days, Orlando allegedly hid out in this small town, in the house where he grew up, across the street from the church his family once attended. Back in Binghamton, Steve Cornwell wasn't sure Nicaraguan authorities were even looking for Tercero.
We had no communication with anybody in the government of Nicaragua at that point for those few days.
Then, 4 days after his arrival, Orlando's mother drove him an hour south to the much larger city of León to get medical attention.
According to the police report, Orlando Tercero was brought to this hospital with self-inflicted wounds, implying he tried to take his own life.
It's possible that someone here recognized the fugitive. The story had been in the news for days. We were told that this is where police finally found and arrested Orlando. The next day in Managua, police held a press conference informing the world that Orlando Tercero was in custody and put him on display for all to see.
They showed Orlando Tercero. We knew he was there. So, my thought was, what do I do now? Where do we go from here?
Now in custody, Orlando had yet to be charged with a crime by Nicaraguan authorities. An international fight for justice had only just begun. Less than a week after Orlando Tercero's arrest, Haley's family and friends gathered in her hometown in New York to lay her to rest.
Everything after that was just a blur, I just can't even, the funeral, I can't even remember who was there.
Just 2 months later, another heart-wrenching day. The one on which Haley would have graduated from Binghamton University, fulfilling her dream of becoming a nurse.
It was probably the saddest day. Just walk in and there's a picture of her on a chair.
Haley's father, Karen's ex-husband, Gordon Anderson, accepted his daughter's diploma in her honor.
Accepting on behalf of Haley Anderson.
I guess the reason why I wanted to do that is because I couldn't see her walk up and get it. That maybe by me going up, I would feel a part of her in me.
As Haley's family was struggling to come to terms with their new reality, the fight to extradite Orlando to the U.S. was in high gear.
Our understanding was that he was going to be extradited back to us.
Broome County District Attorney Steve Cornwell immediately took steps to secure a second-degree murder indictment against him.
I told the family I was optimistic.
You wanted him to be extradited and face
because I wanted
the authorities here.
Yes, and I wanted to see him. I wanted to be face-to-face with him.
But it wouldn't be that simple. Remember, Orlando had dual citizenship in the U.S. and Nicaragua, in an existing treaty does not require either country to extradite one of its own. The effort would stretch on for a year and a half, until September 2019, when Steve Cornwell says he got a call from the Department of Justice.
I was told good news, bad news situation. I said, all right, well, what's the bad news? They're not going to extradite him.
What's the good news?
They're willing to try him in Nicaragua. I thought we had a snowball's chance in hell of getting a conviction in Nicaragua.
In the U.S., a grand jury had charged Orlando with murder in the second degree. In Nicaragua, he would be charged with committing a crime that doesn't even exist here: femicide. It is defined specifically as the murder of a woman with whom the perpetrator had a relationship.
Daniel, you are Orlando's best friend.
Yeah.
While in Nicaragua, we spoke with a group of Orlando's closest friends.
Daniel, do you think your best friend was capable of killing someone?
No.
They say Orlando was an excellent student.
He had the best prospects of our whole high school class.
How would you describe Orlando as a friend?
And he was kind. He always was kind.
He's someone that, if you're ever feeling down, he finds a way to get the biggest smile out of you.
Bien cariñoso.
He was so caring, so respectful.
They simply can't believe the Orlando they know could have killed Haley.
Was he in love with her?
I think he was.
Do you think he was obsessed with her?
No.
Did he ever tell you that she rejected him?
No. Never told me that.
Unlike here in the U.S., Orlando was not required to enter a plea. Steve Cornwell was starting to get nervous.
I was concerned. Are we going to get a trial, or is it going to be a show trial?
Then a glimmer of hope. Cornwell and his office were asked to assist
Blood splatter in the car.
the Nicaraguan prosecution team.
We had 8 days to prepare for trial.
All right.
8 days. And probably the biggest part is to set up a way to communicate.
And how did that happen?
So the Nicaraguan authorities agreed that we could use teleconferencing.
The entire trial would be conducted through teleconferencing. Witnesses would testify from the Broome County DA's office to a courtroom in Managua, thousands of miles away, where a judge, not a jury, would decide Orlando's fate. On October 1st, 2019, the trial began with Haley's mother, Karen, as the prosecution's first witness.
Buenos días. Good morning. Good morning.
The woman sitting to the left is there to help translate.
Did you know did your daughter tell you if she ever had any problem in her relationship with Mr. Rolando?
Yes.
Sí.
That he would not stop texting her and following her and driving by her house.
As Karen testified, she got her first glimpse of Orlando on the screen.
What did you think when you saw him? What did you feel when you saw him?
I felt sad that he ruined so many people's lives. And then as the trial went on, I kept becoming much more and more angry because he acted very arrogant and almost as if he was there and he was bored.
Sí, ella jura.
Haley's roommate, Josie Arton, also testified.
Orlando has always been possessive over Haley.
I did.
As well as Orlando's roommate, Jesse Bua.
They had an on and off relationship for a little over a year.
Kevin Ocampo, Haley's ex-boyfriend, also took the stand, telling the judge about that time Haley's tires were slashed.
At the time, I thought it was because I was seeing Haley again.
Yes.
Sí.
But it was Binghamton police investigator Carl Peters who methodically took the judge through all the evidence,
I viewed the video that was secured from 23 Oak Street.
including all the seemingly damning surveillance footage.
I saw at about 4 o'clock a male and a female walking to the apartment. Later on, what is clearly Orlando Tesoro comes and goes from the doors of the apartment.
And then there was that handwritten note left behind in Orlando's apartment.
In the note, it's written that that he did something stupid and he's sorry. The motive was likely jealousy.
I do.
The judge also heard from Dr. James Terzian, the pathologist who conducted Haley's autopsy
And with marks on her neck.
and determined the cause of death to be asphyxiation by neck compression. For District Attorney Steve Cornwell, the evidence was overwhelming.
He choked her to death. He took Haley, who I believe may have been sleeping, and he choked the life out of her and left her there to rot. That is a sick, disturbed man that could take advantage of somebody he claimed to love and kill her because he couldn't have her.
But Orlando's defense attorney had yet to present his case and was about to argue that Orlando was temporarily insane at the time of the crime.
Did you at any point feel that maybe he's going to get off? Were
The
you
only thing I
worried?
was worried a little bit about was the insanity plea.
Orlando's defense attorney, Eduardo Rubi, argued that due to the influence of alcohol, Orlando was temporarily insane at the time of Haley Anderson's murder. And in an effort to prove it, he called a psychiatrist as his first and only witness. Dr. Ronald Lopez Aguilar, who was appointed by the court, testified that Orlando told him he had no recollection of what happened, claiming he woke up after a night of heavy drinking to find Haley dead. But the expert couldn't verify whether any of that was true and said there's no way to tell what Orlando's state of mind was at the time of the murder. Instead, he could only say there was nothing wrong with the defendant's current mental state.
It's indefensible. It was an indefensible case. I would say there is absolutely no possibility that he doesn't remember what happened. There's no evidence that he was drunk or on drugs. There's no evidence that he had some sleepwalking disorder and, commits murder in his sleep.
After both sides rested, Judge Fabiola Betancourt did something that would never happen in the U.S. before a verdict. She gave Haley's family the last word.
Haley was a beautiful, intelligent, and friendly girl. She was an aspiring nurse and had her whole life to look forward to. She was and still is my best friend. So thank you for listening and letting me speak on behalf of my daughter.
Then it was over. And Steve Cornwell expected at least a day of deliberation. Instead, the judge shocked him by saying she would return with her verdict after a brief recess.
It was a surprise. That's not the way our system works. Here, a judge will normally say, okay, thank you. I'm going to, deliberate on my own and write a decision.
After a tense 90 minutes, the judge returned with a bold statement. Denouncing violence against women and advocating for equal rights, she said Orlando disposed of Haley because he did not accept that she had control over herself. Then came the words Haley's family had been waiting for.
Oh, God.
Guilty of femicide.
Guilty of femicide.
Her parents were advised to try and not show any emotion in front of the cameras. When the verdict finally came in and he was found guilty,
Yes.
what did you think and how did you feel?
It's so hard to say. It doesn't bring her back. And it doesn't give you that sense of, you don't really feel better, but you do feel like you can close the book on that chapter now and start trying to move forward and heal.
Karen was once again given the opportunity to address the court. And this time, she spoke directly to Orlando.
I hope that you get the highest amount of years behind bars because you deserve even more than that.
2 weeks later, Orlando Tercero was sentenced. In her decision, Judge Betancourt said Tercero took it upon himself to punish Haley for rejecting him. Then she punished him with the maximum, 30 years in prison.
I couldn't believe it. I was so happy that we could work with this other country and that the prosecuting attorney did such a good job and was so passionate about this conviction and the judge, and it was just amazing to me.
We owe the Nicaraguan authorities, the prosecutor, the court system, we owe them tremendous thanks, and they have my gratitude for the rest of my life. 30 years is a long time.
30 years. It's a punishment Orlando's friends find hard to believe he deserves.
Estar viendo a mi amigo.
To see that they gave my friend a sentence that's the maximum here, right? It's very hard.
None of Orlando's friends have seen him since his conviction, but some have received phone calls and letters, including Ashley Lopez.
I feel like his faith has grown a lot more, in God so much. He always asks me to keep him in my prayers and to be positive.
They all still support him, and some are even convinced of his innocence.
I stand firm in saying that no, he wasn't really guilty. I feel like they're missing something.
Another of Orlando's high school friends, who asked to remain anonymous, suspects there is truth to Orlando's defense that he was not in his right mind when Haley was killed.
I don't know if they were under the effects of alcohol, drugs, or something, but something happened there for him to act in that way.
I asked if she believes that being under the influence justifies murder.
No, nothing can justify that, of course not. But I also don't know in what state the two of them would have been in for him to do that. I don't know what might have really happened in that room. I don't know.
Orlando is still betting on that very question. What was his state of mind at the time of the murder? His defense attorney wants a new psychiatrist to take a look at the case. Will an appeals court allow it? And is there a chance that Orlando could be set free?
He's a killer. And if he didn't kill Haley that day, he probably would have killed somebody else someday. And if he's ever released, he'll kill again.
On the morning of February 4th, 2020, a heavily guarded Orlando III was back in a Nicaraguan courtroom, this time to appeal his conviction before a panel of 3 magistrates.
Buenos días a todos y todas.
The proceedings began with Orlando's trial attorney, Eduardo Rubí, still handling the case and still arguing that Tercero was highly intoxicated and temporarily insane at the time of the murder. He wants a new psychiatric evaluation, this time by a forensic psychiatrist well-versed in temporary insanity defenses. Josie finds it very difficult to believe that Orlando can't remember killing her friend.
A nursing student, if you're strangling someone, he's gonna recognize, in whatever state, he's gonna recognize this person is dying, I need to stop.
How do you put that power in your own hands and look at somebody and watch them, their breath get taken away from them? So intimate to me and so brutal. I mean, it's one thing to kill somebody with a gun, but to just take their lives with your hands like that is so raw and sad and just unbelievable.
Rubí also argued that Orlando was wrongly charged with femicide and sentenced to 30 years. In the U.S., he was charged with second-degree murder and would likely have faced a lighter sentence with the possibility of parole. Rubí insisted that the Nicaraguan courts are legally obligated to follow those guidelines. To everyone's surprise, the magistrates immediately considered and rejected the request for a second psychiatric opinion. But on the question of modifying Tercero's sentence, they said they would need time to deliberate.
En este momento no emitimos ninguna resolución.
Nearly 3 weeks later, We were back in New York with Karen Anderson, still awaiting a decision from the Nicaraguan courts in what used to be Haley's bedroom, now a sanctuary for her ashes.
This is Haley right here. She's in here. I wanted to keep her with me.
You said you did this interview to honor Haley.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Because I want her death to have some purpose in life. I would like femicide to be brought to the attention in the United States, seeing as though it's probably on the rise and it is a very serious crime.
You wish that there was a femicide law here in the U.S.?
Yes. And also to all of the people who see red flags, to make sure you follow through and take them very seriously to help prevent these things from happening.
On March 10th, 2020, nearly 2 years to the day that their daughter was murdered, Karen and Gordon Anderson were once again at the Broome County DA's office, this time to hear the appellate court's decision. The hearing took over an hour, while an officer of the court read the 12-page decision. In the end, it took a nervous Karen Anderson a moment to realize that the appeal had been completely denied.
I appreciate all the work that you have done in helping to convict Orlando to the fullest extent of the law.
Orlando Tercero's conviction and sentence would stand. Orlando will likely spend the next 30 years here in Nicaragua's main penitentiary, known for its overcrowding. Every day, he will be fed a small meal of rice and beans. If he wants more, his mother will have to deliver food to the prison gates. Steve Cornwell says if for any reason Tercero is ever freed and even tries to step foot on American soil, Broome County will arrest him and put him on trial.
There's no double jeopardy, so if for some reason he was released, the entire case can be tried here on behalf of the family.
As Haley's family and friends continue to heal from their loss, they are determined to keep her memory alive.
What would you say to Haley's parents, if you could?
Even though Haley's time was short, she had touched so many people's lives that I've known, and that they should be really, really proud of who Haley was as a person.
One time, we were all sitting in her bed, and she asked us, like, what does depression feel like? And the idea that someone is just that, like, happy, innocent, pure content.
I want people to know that she was kind, that she was generous, that she was hardworking, but most of all, that she loved almost everyone that she came in contact with.
How do you want Haley to be remembered?
As the millennial hippie that just has quirky and happy. And, you know, as sad as it is that she trusted everybody, that's a good quality. You should trust people.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode.